Hello, welcome to Drawing 2 demo. Today I'll be showing you how to use your open palette using the water-soluble wax pastels. This is the image that I'll be working from. Now when I start a drawing, especially when I'm using color, I like to think of the image as an overall two-part value and composite drawing. So what I try to see is just flat shapes, the positive and negative shapes. I will also think about abstracting the value features of the entire drawing. So I'll be looking at my darks and my lights and my shapes. And that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for dark shapes and light shapes. Now when I establish something, like you see there, I latch on to a cornerstone. And that cornerstone for me is the spout to the lid. And so I will use that measurement now as my truth on my canvas. So I'm looking from the spout to the lid, emphasizing my darks, shading in everything that is a positive shape at this point. And as I travel from one place to another, I will modulate my value. So it's not a true composite drawing like in drawing 1. And it's not a true two-part value. It's a meld of the two. A composite drawing and a two-part value drawing. I will also protect my brightest brights that I know I'm going to be going over with pure white. As you can see there, I left a white hole in my composite drawing of the teapot. That's there so I know, okay, do not cover that area up with too much medium. It'll just be easier for me to think about that now instead of trying to add white on top of all this other color. Now you can see that I'd measured from the lid to the handle, and the distance from my lid to where the handle began is where my lemons start and where my lemons will end. So I found a cornerstone, if you will, without having to plan the whole drawing, without any organizational line or using any pencil. I'm just focusing on one area, then using the measurements of that area to accurately get the right size shapes. And then I abstract those shapes into a meld of two-part value and composite drawing. Here I am filling in the glass jar. And when you think about glass, I really think about the darkest darks in that glass, and then I modulate very carefully throughout the glass. I'm using the brown to build up my layer because as a painter, I think about adding this warmth underneath so that my second layer can be cool colors and the cool colors can play with the warmth on top. So again, I'm not exactly coloring in the positive shapes to be flat composite shapes. I'm looking for the modulation of darks and lights. Right now I'm just using the brown because I'll really enjoy the warmth that it will have when I attack the canvas with a water brush. Right here, I'm carefully making sure that I'm not adding my darkest darks where there's going to be some light areas. At this point, Act 2, I'm not too concerned about getting everything accurate. I'm just looking for big abstract darks and light shapes while modulating my values. I'm quickly blocking in the fabric here because it's something that I can render later. I just want medium on the surface. It is often said that how do you expect to draw or paint if there's no medium on the canvas? If you're just inching towards your way through a drawing, you're going to be doing that, inching towards it. So here, I am now attacking my canvas with my brush, using water. I'm also thinking about starting from the dark areas and bringing water and medium towards the light areas. Because if I start from the darkest areas and bring water towards the light areas, I'm naturally modulating my values. This is just a really good excuse right now to get medium on the surface because that canvas surface is so white. I don't want to be drawing on white, especially with this water-soluble wax pastel. As you've seen so far from your studies, it really looks like crayon in those first layers. So to get past that playfulness of what crayon looks like, I'm getting through it and getting to a more serious look and serious aesthetic versus the crayon aesthetic by just modulating from the darks to the lights using a watercolor brush. Again, you can see where I'm kind of protecting those areas that are white. Although I wouldn't be concerned if I got some brown on there. There you can see I accidentally had too much medium on my brush and I covered that white area too much. But what's beautiful about this medium, the water-soluble wax pastel, is I can dip my brush in pure water and actually pick up medium to recover my highlights. So it's a very nice reductive tool depending on the surface that you're painting on. Again, you can see I am just covering all paper, all the canvas white, because there is nothing that's going to be as white as it looks in nature compared to the white of the canvas. At this point, I'm thinking about that fabric in the background from my reference image. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh, I will make that fabric background. But as the drawing evolves, I rethink that and change the background. That's the thing about this medium too, is that it can unfold new answers for you as you're traveling across, looking for darks and lights and color. That it'll show you don't have to draw everything that you're seeing perfectly. What can I get away with this medium without having to draw it? How much can I get away with? How much information do I need to make it look like the thing that I'm drawing? I always ask myself that question, and that's something that we should ask ourselves that question in Studio Lab. So you can see here, I am not leaving that background unattended to the very last when I finish all my positive shapes. I want that canvas to be covered so that I know how dark my darkest darks need to be and how light my lights need to be. If the paper was always showing, if the canvas was showing that white all the way through, I wouldn't know how bright I could get or how dark I could get. My highlights in my tea kettle would look so weak compared to the white of the canvas. You can see here that I'm using the canvas pad paper that I tore out from a canvas roll. And I did that because I played with this medium a lot. And as a painter, I'm very heavy-handed with the brush. I want to have the control of being able to take away medium and water. Here you can see I'm dampening the canvas with a rag, paper towel, picking up excess moisture so I can start right away on my second layer. You see I'm testing the surface, making sure that it's dry enough. Again, I like the canvas because it acts more like a painting instead of a watercolor or a pastel drawing. And I can't tear up the canvas at all. I could actually wipe this whole surface back down to white if I wanted to, because the canvas texture and canvas quality is so much stronger than paper. And that is an option for you guys to use for your open palette project. At this point, you have seen the pros and cons of paper, and hopefully after this video you open up your options to what surface you would like to draw on for your open palette project. There I am attacking the darkest darks with black and red, orange, yellow, and brown. I know that I need to get black in those areas because that is my darkest darks on my surface. But I don't want to just use black because then it'll be super cold and won't create a complementary contrast that I would want to achieve next to color that is more bright. So you can see there I laid that red really hard, and now I'm laying that green on top to gray that down with a chromatic gray, and then attacking that area again with black to take it down in value and in saturation. So I'm constantly layering colors, and I'm constantly thinking, how do I get to a bright highlight without picking up my white? How do I travel across my open palette from black to a bright white? You can see there I just went in with pure yellow around that white area. That is a transition color. Going from the highlight straight to that reddish black chromatic gray would not look like a highlight. It would still look like a white hole. But by thinking about the transition color, the color from white to a dark, the transition color is actually the strongest and most intense color of an object. There you can see I circled that highlight with a purple because it's a cooler highlight. And that transition color now is a cooler color. Purple is colder than yellow. So by creating a transition color of purple going to white, the highlight now looks colder than it does compared to the big highlight right below it. The transition color is the color that is going to be the most saturated color on your object. And that color exists between going from the darks to the lights. And if you nail that transition color, your objects will look more round and realistic. So pay attention to that transition color. Transition color is also easy to remember because it is your pure pastel color. It'll be if it's a leaf, it'll be the greenest part of that leaf. If it's a brass tea kettle, it'll be a yellow. If it's an apple, the transition color will be a vibrant red. And it doesn't exist for a very long time. In fact, it's really, it almost is the width of a line. If you get that transition color, your objects will look more realistic, more round, and more vibrant. Again, I am just layering colors over each other. If it's a very dark, I think about what color is the object that I'm painting, that I'm drawing. Now, is that color going to get me dark enough? If not, what colors do I need to create a dark for that object? And I will lay those colors down. Often, if it's dark enough, I will start with black and then up the chroma by layering pure color on top of that. If the pure color and black becomes too vibrant, I will then add the complementary colors that I added in that area. And then once you do that, the value actually gets higher, so you go back in with black to lower the value back down. It's a push and pull with this medium. The more colors you use and the more layering you do, the better quality drawing you will achieve. As you can see in that texture right now that I'm attacking with the brush, I am thinking about my brush and the medium and my values that I laid down, and I'm trying to mimic the intricate shape of that tea kettle without having to draw that intricate shape. As you see there, I am pushing my brush around in ways, stabbing the surface, contouring the darks the way it feels like in my reference image. I am trying to think, how can I make that look like that without having to make it look like that? Ask yourselves those questions and you'll achieve better quality drawings with more atmosphere and more openness. Right here I'm adding the darks of the leaves of the lemon, and they're almost as dark as the black in the tea kettle. But I'm not just making it black, I'm making it warm black, closer to the green. And what that means is, if I'm shadowing green, what we're learning is that you can't just use black. It'll be a cold green that doesn't make sense in the image. I have to bring the complement in to gray down the chroma, because that green is so intense, it'll look fake. But by bringing down the chroma of the green, by using the complementary color red, I tone down the image, the green, to a chromatic gray, getting me closer to the value and the hue. Here I'm going into the plate. White is such a beautiful color to paint and draw. It's almost an area where you can have free license to layer all these pretty colors together to make a chromatic gray. So I'll use blue, I'll use orange, I'll use green, I'll use red, black, blend it together, and use white. There I'm upping the contrast of the knob of the tea kettle to make sure that I have my cornerstone resolved to a certain point. I'm going back in and adding my transition colors even more pronounced. As you can see now, those highlights are kind of zinging at you. They have a vibrance now. I've upped the vibrance simply by using the transition color. And it's really just this thin line that outlines my highlights in this circumstance. I've also noticed that the top of the lid is cooler than the reflected light coming from the below the tea kettle. So I added purple and I added white. Purple to cool down the color using a chroma, and white to dull the intensity of that purple. Now I'm going into the lemons, laying down this vibrant yellow and white. And the lemons were a beautiful addition to the still life, because I got to use the complementary color of yellow, which is purple. Using the purple to create these beautiful shadows that felt as if the lemons were receding into a bowl and the light was hitting them from the right side. I'm also not thinking about what object I'm drawing. I never think that I'm drawing a peeled lemon at this point. I am looking at the pattern of darks and lights, just abstract dark and lights. I also pay attention a lot to the negative space. What is a negative space doing in complicated areas? And can I abstract the complicated negative shapes to create a tonal value? Or is it a negative shape that'll help me define my positive shape? Ask yourselves those questions. There you can see I'm using the purple to create value structure in the lemon peel, and also using black. And then what I find that shadow, that core shadow of that peel hitting the table is actually too cold. So I warm it up with orange and red and still add purple too, so that the value goes down and not up in intensity and on the value scale. As you can see there, I just was kind of inching towards that value, and then I realized how dark that image, that section of the lemon peel actually was. So I just got straight to that value by adding black so that I can get to that value, and then from there up the chroma so it doesn't just feel like there's black on yellow. In fact, I'm going from black to that same value of that black, but with more chroma. And the only way I can add more chroma is by using the complementary color of yellow, which is purple. And by going from the black, straight black, I can see how dark I need to go, but also I will go from that black to a chromatic dark. Here I'm going to use the brush with very little water to tone down some of the texture and some of the line quality that I'm making in the shadows, and to really define the edges. The brush tool is really effective in sharpening edges and toning down areas that do not need to be as loud. As you notice, if you start coloring in with your pastel, you'll notice that you can see your line movement. It creates too much movement in areas that do not need movement. So that's when I will use the brush. I think it's an effective tool to tone down any movement. Here I'm blocking in the table, and here's a good example of thinking, how can I make an intricate pattern without having to make it look that way? Because we don't have a month to do a drawing from life. We have to think about the drawing from life as an informative tool to help us resolve things from life quicker. So on this table, I'm thinking, how can I make an intricate pattern? Where am I seeing bright, saturated colors? Where am I seeing middle grays? Where am I seeing darks? And in those brights, are there multiple colors? Are there oranges and reds and yellows? And the darks, are they just complementary or black? And in the darks, does the value modulate? These are questions I'm asking myself. Then I'll attack this complicated surface with the brush tool to meld the edges together. If you haven't realized how important edges are on a drawing, please do so now. As you can see, that if I kept the intensity of the drawing, of the mark making on the tabletop, it would distract you from the other areas that I focused on. So the brush brings those edges together and then modulates the value and blends complementary colors together to create a chromatic gray that recedes as if it was a tabletop without having to do all the perspective drawing of that design. Such a great tool. This medium is so versatile. Again, using canvas, the problem of paper is that it can become torn up on the surface. So you have to maintain control throughout. With the canvas, you maintain control, but you don't have that concern of, am I putting too much water? That variable of your equation is out the window. And that's really nice for me. That's what I found personally that I like better. What I really like about paper with this medium, though, is how soft it can end up looking on paper. It has this paper and pastel and watercolor coming together is a beautiful, makes a beautiful product. I also want to talk about switching gears. So at the beginning of this drawing, I went slow in the fact that I wanted to build the skeleton just right. I latched on to a part of the still life that I could draw without having a problem drawing it. Then from there, I latched onto it as a cornerstone, as a place of reality on my drawing, and used that tool to measure objects and distances between those objects using that cornerstone. And then from there, I kind of switched gears to go a little quicker after that and block in the area so that there's no white showing through unless I'm protecting that area because it's a giant highlighted area. Then, when I'm to a point of resolving things from dark to light, I start to look at the transition colors, which means I need to slow down and look at what I'm drawing. So here I'm looking at the complicated shape that is the glass. At first it seems complicated. Then I look at it and I think that is just basically three values. My darkest dark, the grays in between, and the brightest bright. I'm going back in with my brush to kind of tone down those darkest darks in terms of movement so they recede and become more mysterious. I'm also here picking up highlights or putting in highlights with oranges, yellows, and whites. And I bounce back from all three of those, making sure that it doesn't get too warm. And I'll add white to tone down the value and intensity, then bring up the warmth just a little bit so that it's not too cool. It's always a too cool, too warm push. If you just ask yourself, what is that color look like? And then just lay it down. Don't overthink it. Is it orange? Is it an orangish color? Just add the orange. And from there, ask yourself, do I need to make it colder? Do I need to make it darker? Do I need to make it warmer? All those things will become clear as you make your marks. That's why this medium is so great, because you can stack on to those marks that you've made, building off of one another to create the chroma that you need. Here I'm blocking in the big darks at the bottom to show you that this tablecloth falls off a table edge, giving me a sense of gravity, both in the composition and in the reality of this drawing. Here I'm laying down the cast shadow tones and values. And then I come in with a red, and it's this thin detail of light that passes through the peel and that's still in front of the plate just by a little bit. So I am not thinking about those little details at the beginning of my drawing, thinking, okay, don't put anything here because it's pure color. It is pure color, but in reference to the value, it's a dark pure color. And those little things shouldn't matter until the very end of your drawing. So by adding all those darks, then I look and I see, oh, look at that sliver of light passing through. I lay on some red, and it stays on, and it's the correct value. I always take a step back too, so that was me taking a step back, looking at my overall drawing and my overall values. I'm laying in the dark because at this point I'm still thinking that I'm going to make that fabric background an actual fabric background. But what changes my mind is after I laid this white fabric in the foreground and the softness of that, I at this point think that is such a beautiful soft overall shape. Not thinking that it's fabric, but I'm thinking, look at the softness of this. The white is glazing over the warm tones that I laid down in my first layer, and they're playing together and creating something that I really like visually. After that, I inform myself, okay, I like this. The background does not need to be a fabric anymore. It needs to be more of a wall. But I like the color that is that wall. So what I'll do is pick a chromatic gray that's based off that a value off of the background from my reference image and lay that down later. I'm starting to add more contrast, more darks where they need to be darks. And I also think about shadows and white as a structure of chromatic grays. So whatever can get me a gray that's not too cold or dead, I will add that color into it. So at this point, I don't want too much chroma in this big, huge fabric, because what I'll do later is glaze, basically parallel hatch over the entire white to warm it up with orange. Because the fabric was so white, I just went in. I'm adding all these darks to tone it down in value. And in that, I started realizing I'm making that really cold. The temperature, the overall temperature of this is not right. But that doesn't mean you should paint over it. All you need to do is emphasize more warmth. And how do I do that without painting it over? Parallel hatching over the entire surface. I also ask myself, what am I painting? What am I drawing all the time? At this point, I'm asking myself finally that question. What am I drawing? A fabric. Am I going to handle the fabric the same way I handled my lemons? No. So I'll tell myself you should basically draw this entire section with a brush. There's the orange. As you can see, I'm just scrubbing across it. I'm not making it too pronounced. I just need some hint, some optical color mixture to make it feel as if the overall coolness of the gray has come to a warmth, a place of warmth. I took a step back to really evaluate my shapes and my lights and darks comparatively to my reference. And I'm seeing little things now that I can start adding to or taking away to make my image more successful as an image. It shouldn't be our goal, drawing from life, to make it look exactly like that. Our goal with this medium is to make it feel like it is what it is without it being that way. It's a trick of the mind. And what's nice about that trick is the viewer and other artists are seeing your drawing and think that is so realistic. And then in person, they have another experience, and that experience is the history of your image. All the depth, parallel hatching, cross hatching, watercolor features, the wax stacking on top of each other, creating more color. The negative shapes that you use to draw your positive shapes. All those exist when you try to leave things as open-ended as possible and concluding some of those open-ended areas in some places, not concluding it overall. Not treating every area of your surface with equal focus. That'll help you create so much more atmosphere with those kind of concepts. So at that point, I realized I'm going to just tone down the warmth of the background to a green.